house was built by Uncle Frank. He was a bachelor, and he wasn't very conservative, I guess you might say, as bachelors aren't. And finally, he'd sold all of his ground, and he was always close to Mother because his mother died when he was born, and he was the youngest after Mother, and they were quite close. And so I came over to Dad, and he would mind if he built a little home here. Dad agreed. In 1930, he built a little home here. You asked me about the water wheel. Well, one day, originally the mill race ran up to the fence there, right here, and it was filled in down to there. The big water wheel was just beyond this fence. It was 4 feet in diameter and 18 feet, 4 feet wide and 18 feet in diameter. It sat down in the basement of the mill. Actually, it was a mill, what they called the mill trough, just for the wheel, outside the foundation of the mill. You understand? So that the wheel separate wall stone. And so one day I was sitting up there on the edge of the mill race, and just before that I had talked to an old man that was lived during the mill. One day he and his buddy were 1895, one afternoon, and they were sitting by the side of the water wheel holding willows. As the wheel went around, and it goes splash, 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 as the wheel hit the willows. And he said an old gentleman came, and they had grease boxes on the side of the wheel, and he greased the axles of the wheel. And so I was sitting here one day thinking about that, and I thought, it's just tragic that I was born so late, I didn't get to see the water wheel. It would have been so wonderful to see a water wheel turn. Oh, I would like to have done that. And I thought thinking, my mind was blown. I thought, we've got the water here, why don't we have a wheel? Yeah, why don't I build a wheel? I'll build a wheel. And I jumped up and literally started throwing in, because I decided to build it lower down. Besides that, it was quite dangerous. There were trees hanging over it, and it was a very eerie place, a very mysterious place, and the shadows down in there. And I used to go down there and find snakes, fish, everything. And I could see how we filled it in. They'd taken old rims off of wheels to hold the rocks together. And so I decided I would get a 15-inch pipe, and I put a pipe in the bottom, and then I put the mill race down to about, I would build a cement retaining wall, and then I would build a water wheel. And so it took 2 weeks, of course, to do it. Fill in the when you start. The reason the wheel is this large, I had to worry about how big to make it. I wanted it to make it big enough that it was, it was impressive, but I was limited because what was I going to make it out of? So I decided that I would take a piece of 4x8 plywood, and I've got the max size I could make it. So by using pieces out of 4x8, I discovered that I could make it 22 inches wide and 11 feet in diameter. And you notice how I have the cups. The cups are quite steep. They're not a tangent. They're straight. They're very steep, so that just a little bit of water makes them go very, very fast. You see over here where water comes in? You can imagine how fast it would go with a lot of water. It could go awfully fast. Now this is the water wheel I made, you know, because in '84 when the flood came and real up. It almost identical to that one. It worked out so good. And I put some redwood pieces inside the cups though to make it, and it lasted a lot longer. So anyway, this was just done for aesthetics. I wanted the wheel to stand up high, and it worked out really well. You know, dripping is what waters the plants from the water wheel running. Actually, the design of this wheel came a lot years, but it's really.
All right.
I had the same inspiration about building the barn. I was sitting up here somewhere for the mill race, and I thought of the old barn, and I thought of the athletes that said that time to tear down. And I thought, why couldn't I have my own barn? Yeah, why couldn't I? See, one time I was up in that barn, it was like in Cube, you know, and it was so low, the hay was. I could only walk it in a little very short distance, and when I put the hay underneath where the roof came down low, I had a hard time getting them out. One day I picked up a bale, and I had to duck my head and lift the bale, and my back, ooh, my sacroiliac just turned out. So as I was sitting here thinking about the barn, I thought, why couldn't I own barn? Why couldn't I have a Dutch barn? A Dutch barn. And so I jumped up that very morning and started tearing down the old barn. And as it fell down, the dust rose like a plume after 40, 50 years of dirt. And first I was going to add 10 to the special barn, but now then I came to the Dutch barn idea, and it worked out good. And it's all made out of the lumber from the Arback estate up by Castle, all except just the skin on the outside. All of the timbers, all of the 2x4s and 2x6s came out of these back days. The boys tear it down. We hauled it down on my old '60 Oldsmobile station wagon. I always wanted a grape arbor, but I couldn't figure out where to put it. And I thought and thought and thought, and then all of a sudden it just came to me as an inspiration. Put it right against this cellar, because then you can go under it and you can sit and pick it, you know. The reason I built the root cellar, you see, this was the basement of the barn. See that wall there? That wall right there. That wall right there was the wall of the barn. It wasn't the wall, but that's right where the wall was, and it ran up. It was 30 by 40, and we had it all filled in with. We hauled it and filled it all in with clay. So when I came to build the root cellar, dig it out again, and it was so much fun building this root cellar. The horses used to come in that big ball mill. The horses used to come through here in a door, and they would drop them down from the floor. Horses would pick 300 eggs that were raised here. Along with fed them with the grist from the mill, the bran and there was a big stack right on the east of the. And one day they were putting up hay, and Dad was up on the haystack, and a big rat came running up in. And Dad was not a great sportsman, you know, but he liked to fish. But he took his pitchfork, and he said, "Now watch this." Threw his pitchfork from that haystack and got that rat, that pitchfork. And if I live, I'll never forget it. The pigs we used to big, they couldn't walk. We had a big sow that must have weighed 1,000 pounds, and we just had to shoot her. She could hardly get around. A year, killed a pig and hung him up in this tree. Everything on the whole place made from something that was something else. barns made out of the estate of our backs. Door came off of their root cellar up there. It's a great old door. It's a great old door. See how thick it is? When that estate fell apart and everything was falling down, I rescued everything. I rescued the door. The root cellar was all caved in. The house was falling apart. Kids were throwing bricks through the windows. I got permission. I had my horses up there then. They had about 20 acres. And I enjoyed it all. And I got all the lumber out of their 4-car garage and all the lumber out of the big mansion and built the barn. So that everything you look at comes from somewhere else. It's secondhand. You can see, I had my wish. I could pick my hanging down in my face, you see. Can I have my... Can I have it?
Okay.
Well, I wanted to build a log, something or other, you know. And so I finally decided to build my tack house to put my saddles in. And I could have logged without any bark on, but I had to have it look rustic. And then I could have bought those Lincoln logs, you know, put them together in a couple of hours, but oh no, I had to do it the hard way. So I cut all those joints with my chainsaw, 116 joints, put that together. And it's very well put together. It has the same joint that you find in drawers of cupboards, you know. They're locked together and locked together. And then I had a man do a special type of shingle. Notice how the shingles aren't even? It's a variegated. It's very, very different. You can see inside the shack house if you want. So anyway, I had a good friend of mine how to put those horses so they're solid.
Cool.
These are antiques. Old antiques. An old scythe, an old timber saw, and a to cut hay.
Cool. That's neat. Where'd this come from?
Look at this chandelier. This is the Arback estate.
Oh, that's great. See if I can get in close. These are the vultures that live at my dad's house. See that one? Lion? Look how big they are. Roost up in this old tree.
They come every morning.
They come every morning.
There's 25 or 30 that sit on these fences every morning. And see, here they come. No, take this one coming in. See how they come in? Now, let's just stay here for a second. Because they'll come in, about 25 of them. They come to take a drink out of the ditch. They preen their feathers here.
Savannah, don't.
Preen their feathers, and then they fly out to Skull Valley or somewhere to find an old dead sheep or something.
Focus for me. There we go, finally. Okay, now oh, it went out.
Could even fly.
You can see these birds in comparison to the geese behind them. Geese are big birds.
Big.
And
the
these,
wingspan's about 1/2 feet.
Really? So these are big birds sitting up there on that fence. They're every bit as big as those geese down there.
You got him?
I got him. He's just sitting there enjoying the morning sun.
Here comes one coming in. Now this stone here very interesting. Just dished out. Notice how it's just designed for this perfectly. I found this stone about 40 years ago when I filled in the mill race, and somehow it attracted me, and I knew then someday I was going to use it somewhere else. So I put it in the bushes, and then when I built this in about 1966, when I had it all built, I needed this stone for the water to fall on, and I recalled that I somewhere, and I looked and looked for 2 days and finally found this. So everything's worked out just like it was preordained, you know.
So what is that water there?
This water comes from under the ground. You see, I have a pipe running over to this wall and down, and it goes in that 15-inch pipe that at the bottom. It runs up 21 feet. See, if you'll turn around now and point the camera just down the wall, and point the pipe.
There's the pipe feeding the water.
This pipe going down here?
Yeah, there's the pipe.
Right there.
Yeah. And that's for
Yes, it's from the spring. It's not
the spring under there.
it's really a spring, but actually it operates on the underground water that comes down the spring.
Oh.
It used to run all year long, but because of the people that moved in, all the water's been used up, you see.
You're right.
So it isn't nearly as good a spring as it used to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've worn out 2 of these already.
Huh?
The kids have worn out one, just pumped it to death.
Huh?
This is built a little better, so you see it pumps a lot of water.
Wow, that's wonderful. Look at that water.
Now this has been an inspiration because the grandkids have enjoyed this more than almost any other thing.
Yeah, they have.
On, okay, and dropped off terribly dangerous, you see. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to solve this? What can I do to make it less dangerous and also enjoyable? One day I was sitting here and I got an inspiration. I'll just make a little alcove. Jumped on the telephone, called a bulldozer, the backhoe man. He came, tore it all up, cut it all out, and then I put cedar posts in, cedar post down there, and put a wall around it, and it worked out just beautifully. And then I had to build this, of course, and put this fence around it. So it worked out about as good as I could probably dream. Now, ever since the mill was built in 1888, we just owned the property running on this line here. We're back shed, not even to the barbecue. And then it ran up along, like I told you yesterday, you know, it runs up all the way south, up to the corner of the creek. So we didn't have any creek frontage at all. Our property line ran up by those benches, up along, and then ended up on the edge of the stream. In 1940, the people that lived across the street, Bob Woolley's folks, you know, they got divorced, and they were fighting, and everybody was hating each other. And so one day, the dad's father came over and said, "Darwin, we're kind of tired of this property over here. We came across the spring to they used to try to raise flowers, and Bob Woolley raised chickens, had chicken coops here and everything." He said, maybe you'd like to all the people in the world that you could. No, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to buy it. You couldn't afford $1,000 in 1949? Well, I gulped, absolutely gulped, and I said, because I had just been to California and earned $6,000 selling suits. And so I said, maybe I can take that $1,000. Never dreaming that the wife, Mrs. Woolley, would ever sign a deed, you know, because they were divorced. But she did. And so this $1,000 gave us the whole picnic area, you see. Yeah. And it gave us 300 feet on Cottonwood Creek. 300 feet on Cottonwood Creek. Wow. And all this picnic area where the barbecue is, and the volleyball court. And then I was able to put the water wheel in, don't you see? Because they always claimed that they owned the mill race, and so I couldn't do anything with the mill race until I had this piece of property. And so right after I had the piece of property, you see, then that's when I got the inspiration to fill in the mill rate down to there and build a water wheel.
Huh.
Something else, and I've just incorporated it. This big timber, a foot square, this is one of the timbers that held up the bridge that came across the creek when the woolies used to come across and try to use that little piece of property. But one spring, the water pretty well destroyed the bridge. And that's when they kind of gave up this piece of property, you see. So I was able to get this one timber, drag it over here as a memento of that old bridge. So I've been able to utilize things from other places. Now those old tractors, of course, were built in 1940. I have 3 of them. There's one out in the orchard. They're all interchangeable parts. One has a loader on it, you can see. One has a hydraulic middle in the back, so I can put a V plow on it and plow my driveway. The other one has a pull bar in the back so I can plow. And so my friends kid me because I don't have a 3-point hitch. That's the modern way to hook on your equipment. But I say, I don't need a 3-point hitch because I've got 3 tractors. And this doesn't, I hope this doesn't look so much like a chicken coop anymore, but they were 2 big chicken coops, you know. But this just goes to show what a little stoop will do on a building to change the flavor of it.
Mm-hmm.
See that little stoop on the outside?
Yeah.
Makes it into a carports and storage, and changes the whole nature of the building.
Mm-hmm. Was that there when you were growing up?
Yeah, we built the buildings in 1930.
Oh.
And we had 2,000 chickens.
Wow.
And then everybody went broke because everybody was raising chickens all over the valley, and eggs were about 30 cents a dozen. And so...
Now where was the big hole you talked about?
The what?
The big hole where they threw everything in.
Well, the hole, that was the basement of the mill.
All right, where was it?
It was right over here. This is probably the north end of the mill, basement, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm probably standing about on the corner, the northwest corner of the mill. It was about 30 feet wide and 40 feet long, the mill. And the basement was 16 feet deep. Now here, taking off from this foundation was what they called the wheel pit, the mill wheel pit. This pit was 16 feet wide, and 30 feet long. And it ran down to here. I remember seeing that little wall, the little rock wall that came out here, which formed this big pit. Now the water wheel sat down in this pit, just outside the basement wall of the mill. In this pit, the water wheel. Now the water wheel sat down very low. This was probably the top of the water wheel, about right here. So the water that came around the barn, it probably came around the barn and then came back in a flume and spilled over. See, Now a flour mill has to be run by a water wheel. It's an overshot wheel. The water comes over the top and runs the wheel this way. See, this wheel is going backwards. This wheel is going backwards because the water is coming in the middle of that rock wall. We call it a breast wheel because the water is coming in about the middle. But if you can imagine a flume on top wheel and the water coming this way towards us, how much faster, what little water it would take to run the mill. This water wheel here was 4 feet in diameter, 4 feet wide, and 18 feet. Now the basement, the pit, the wheel pit was 16 feet deep. That means that the water wheel sat up about 2 feet above the mill wall, top wall. The flume came probably, I'm not sure whether the water came through the mill. I think it came around the mill, as you'll see on my diagram. In my model.
Right.
On the model, I've shown that the flume came around the mill and then came this way, and the water poured onto this wheel. And then the mill pit was connected and part of the mill race, you see. It ran all the way down and ran into the big Cottonwood Creek. The flume that came across the field there was about 4 feet wide and 2 feet deep. And so you can imagine a stream of water about that thick hitting that wheel. Terrific. It generated about 150 horsepower or more. But I was born too late. And that old gentleman that said that he and his boyfriend came over, his buddy came over that day and sat with willows, and the wheel kept hitting it, flip, 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 flip. I just lived if I could have that experience. Someone has painted a painting. Someone came out years ago when the mill was still running and made a painting of the water wheel. With the back of the mill, you understand, and the water wheel. I've been trying to find that painting. It's somewhere in the valley. Someone has a painting of the Knudsen mill and the water wheel running.
Isn't Grandpa's place beautiful in the morning? So pretty. This is right where the old house used to stand that Grandpa Knudsen and Great-Grandpa Knudsen grew up in. The dimensions of the width of this house are exactly the dimensions of the house that stood there. Now my dad's built a beautiful new home there, right in its very spot, surrounded by these beautiful flowers. Okay.
These towering pines are mine, you know, and this old millstead where they grow is shaded, where their shadows spread from the westmost fence to the wide creek bed. Not many now would really know who planted them. I am one, though. He must have known when I was 5 that they would live and be alive when he was dead and I was old. But then these thoughts he never told. Instead, he watered them day after day with heavy buckets in his hard way. And now each root and widespread limb breathes a living thanks to him. This old house where he was born is empty now and stands forlorn, not as it was when it stood with pride before his father's father died. And all that is seen of the barn and the mill is the mill race spring and ponds so still, but their deep stone walls rest under this ground. And an old square nail is sometimes found hidden since those days when fancy burned, when the great mill stood and its millstones turned. And yet to those who pass this way, these aging pines are mine.